It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Well, folks, it is time for Herd Mentality. You know the drill. You supply the questions, takes, comments, and I supply some feedback on it. And folks, coming out of this game, I had a ton of questions. And so I couldn't get back to everybody. I'm sorry about that. Just a lot of questions coming in. And I hope that through my analysis in the post-game pod, in the all 22 review, and of course, what I'm going to entertain today, we can really get into everything that people are concerned about. But it just became a lot to manage this time around. And so my apologies if I wasn't able to get back to you with your herd mentality question, but there were a lot of themes and trends in what was asked. And I think we're going to hit pretty much what people are thinking about. And a lot of that has to do with Josh Allen. And so the first chunk here is going to be about Josh Allen and some of the specific questions and concerns that people have. And then we're going to move on into some other really good talking points. The first one comes from Michael. Michael says, I thought your criticism of Josh Allen was spot on in the most recent episodes. By year 6, we expect more of the now veteran. Question, do you think his regression is due to a lack of quarterback coaching or defenses finally catching up to his tendencies? We've seen the deer in the headlight look from Josh more often than it feels like over the last year, and it has me worried that he just can't figure it out or doesn't have the coaching to adapt. Appreciate this question. 2020 Josh Allen, 2021 Josh Allen, and the first half of 2022, really strong football player. Something obviously happened about midway through last season where Josh regressed into some tendencies and habits that aren't smart. They're not good football. He's turning over the ball over, and it's concerning. And figuring out why is difficult because he says all the right things. He goes into press conferences and talks about being smart and taking care of the football. It's all there. He knows what he's supposed to do. Joe Brady and Sean McDermott and Ken Dorsey are not telling Josh Allen to not play smart and make reckless decisions and not run the offense the way it's intended to run. And so to me, it's about Josh Allen in those critical moments, making the right choices. It's something to do with his mental approach, and in those moments, being able to do what he's supposed to do. And unfortunately, right now, he's reverting back to some bad habits. Now, part of this, I want to convince myself, is circumstantial. You have a quarterback in Josh Allen who has emerged as one of the elite players in all of football. Monday Night Football to start the year against a Jets defense that frustrated him quite a bit last year. And I think he wanted to put on a show. I think he wanted to have his highlights. And it wasn't that type of game where that was necessary. He needed to embrace doing the boring, necessary things to win that football game. And he didn't. He didn't do those smart things. And I'm sure it's difficult for Josh Allen, given his size, his athleticism, his arm talent. He probably feels like he's invincible on the football field and can do whatever he wants. And against a disciplined defense like the Jets that forces you to be patient, it was a really bad recipe. Now, I lean a lot more into the overwhelming sample size that tells us that Josh Allen is an elite player that can win a lot of football games and do clutch things and showcase himself well on big stages. We've seen a lot of that. We've seen a ton of that from Josh Allen. And whatever it takes to get back to that is what needs to happen. But you can have all the coaching in the world, but in those critical moments, Josh Allen has to do the smart, right thing with the football and how he approaches the game and the decisions that he makes, or else the Bills are going to continue to have uneven results. And the frustration for Josh Allen as a contributing reason for losses is only going to strengthen. So we'll see how he moves forward from here. I think that's what it's all about. How does he respond? How does he bounce back? How does he take it in stride and fix it, right? He knows what he needs to do. He says it out loud all the time. Now do it, Josh. Grow up. Don't be an immature quarterback and do it. Next one here comes from Justin. Justin says, how can Ken Dorsey help Josh when he gets into these modes where he feels like it's all on him? Is it maybe having more easy button throws? Is it by having this conversation once again? Maybe they need a specific section of the playbook that says, hey, we're calling this because we can see the unraveling happening. What Josh Allen needs to do is he needs to do his 111th. That's what he needs to do. This isn't a situation where he doesn't have weapons, that his offensive line's not good enough, that there's not some level of a run game that he can lean into. Josh Allen just has to do his 111th. And that was very clear when watching that all 22 and studying it and trying to get into why Josh played the way that he did. Ken Dorsey had the right game plan. And for a fair amount of the game, Josh Allen embraced the game plan, but he didn't consistently execute the offense as it was intended on Monday Night Football against the Jets. And so he's got to get back to just doing his 111th, do the boring, necessary things to win a football game. And one thing that I want to point out here, as I've seen a ton of questions come through about how can the coaching staff help Josh Allen in these moments? Josh Allen should not need hand-holding year 6. He has to do the right things in those critical moments. Come on. Ken Dorsey being on the sideline or being up in the booth, should it matter? Josh Allen's played a lot of football. He shouldn't need hand-holding at this point in his career. And so I know that we have this urgency to defend Josh Allen. We want to point to everything around him as the reason something doesn't go the way we want it for Josh Allen because we love him. But this is on Josh. He doesn't need hand-holding. He just needs to play smart football and not cost his football team anymore. Next one here comes from Hassan, who says, when Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow were going through their trials with heavy zone defenses, forcing a patient offensive game plan, were there any strategies their offensive coordinators use scheme-wise that the Bills can apply to help Josh? Thanks for your hard work, especially after a tough week 1 loss. Thank you, Hassan. I think that's a lot of truth to that, right? Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, they went through their challenges with zone defenses, and Josh Allen did too. But Josh Allen got through it, right? Like, it became a non-conversation. That was definitely a conversation that we started to have in 2020. And he answered the question. He's gone back somehow. Now, things that happened with Mahomes and Burrow, who also went through that and got out of it, was a leaning into quick passing and screens in the run game. That's what those teams did. And Josh Allen had every easy button throw you would ever want him to have against the Jets. He just didn't take them. So you can't twist this up and put it on Ken Dorsey. Josh Allen has to execute the offense intelligently. And so, yeah, those are the things that you do. The Bills are not a good screen team. I know that. I get questions all the time. Screens. Folks, they stink at screens. They're not good at it. Why do you want them to do something they're not good at? It's hard to be a good screen team. It takes a lot of practice. For whatever reason, the Bills are not good at it. They don't get the looks for that. When you have zone defense and all the eyes are in the backfield and you have an athletic dual threat quarterback like Josh Allen, you're not getting good screen looks, and the Bills aren't good at it. It's not effective. Why do we want them to do things that aren't effective? It's about taking those quick passes. It's about forcing defenses to come up and tackle. It's about having some yards after catch players, and it's about an effective run game. That's what's going to help Josh Allen be more consistent against these heavy zone defenses that obviously the Jets provide and frustrate him, but surely other teams are going to follow that blueprint, and Josh Allen has to take those steps and figure it out. All right, we got a bunch more to get to here, but first, our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson had a tough time running in week 1 against the Eagles and saved his fantasy value a bit with 6 catches for 64 yards. Expect him to get going on the ground in week 2 after doing little with his first 12 carries of the season. The Dolphins got gashed for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns by the Chargers, and Stevenson's burst and quickness make it an even more favorable matchup against Miami's pass rush-oriented front. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. A couple more Josh Allen items, and then we'll move on. I'm very excited to move on and start talking about the Raiders, which we're going to do really beginning tomorrow with our crossover preview with Locked On Raiders. Next one here comes from Drew. Drew says, do other star quarterbacks ever have such bad games? Absolutely. They absolutely have bad games. In fact, Mr. Joe Burrow, week 1 against the Cleveland Browns, a defense that frustrates him. He went 14 of 31 for 82 yards. 14 of 31 for 82 yards. That's a sub 50% completion percentage and 82 passing yards on 31 attempts. Awful. That's awful production. Yeah, it happens, folks. And so, do you want to lose all your faith in Josh Allen based on this Jets performance? I know it's frustrating. I know that there's certainly things that you can point to last year that carry over into this game that makes it a bit of a trend, but there's ebbs and flows, there's highs and lows in football, and Josh has to get out of it. And I think he can. Next one here comes from Michaela, who says, I know you warned us not to ride the ups and downs of the season, but it's really hard not to feel deflated after seeing an abysmal performance by the offense. Unfortunately, mostly Josh, in my opinion, in the divisional round, preseason week 2, and Monday night against the Jets. Do you think the celebrity status is taking the focus on football off of Allen? I feel like we just saw a performance fresh out of Wyoming, not someone who has been in the talks of being one of the top quarterbacks in the league 2 to 3 seasons straight. Love your pod and analysis, as it's always remains level-headed in times that we feel like trouble. Appreciate the question here, Michaela. And I've gotten a lot of questions about Josh Allen and commercials and playing golf and all of those things, cover of Madden. I don't know how to quantify that. I don't know how to sit here and say that because Josh Allen's in commercial and has a celebrity girlfriend and plays golf, I don't know how to sit here and say how that impacted his ability to not play smart football against the Jets. I don't know. Now, I think it's an easy thing to point to. You're frustrated. You want him to play better. And so you start thinking of every reason why he might not play better. And you think, well, he plays a lot of golf and has a celebrity girlfriend and he's on these commercials. And clearly that's the reason why he's not making smart decisions with the football. I don't know how that impacts him in that critical moment. I don't know when he's rolling to his left and decides to launch the ball down the field into double coverage. Is it because he's playing golf and has a celebrity girlfriend? I have no idea. But I think it's a natural way that a lot of people feel. I don't expect anybody to be a football robot. I think it's good to have balance. He should have a life. He should be able to maximize on his opportunities to earn money as an elite quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is in all the commercials. Andy Reid's in these commercials. Doesn't seem to bother them. You see quarterbacks on the cover of Madden winning Super Bowls. I don't know. It's I can understand the question, but then when you go, just take the practical application of what we're bringing up. You're frustrated that Josh Allen forced a football. Does that have to do with golf and celebrity girlfriends and Madden commercials? I don't know. It's an issue because of, I think we're manufacturing stuff here. I've been very critical of Josh Allen in his offseason and some of his approach stuff and caring for his body and diet. But quantifying that in terms of impact, I have no idea. I feel like there's some opportunity for Josh to dial in more. And performances like this are going to provoke us to lean into those types of questions. But quantifying this is hard. And Josh turns it around. We're going to think it's cool once again that Josh is on the cover of Madden and is on all these commercials. I don't know. Next one here comes from William. William says, curious about your ideas about where to improve on defense, and on the other side, did we lean enough into the run game offensively? Good questions here. On defense, I think the low-hanging fruit for the Bills is tackling. I thought their overall performance defensively was really good. The pass rush was strong. The pass coverage was strong. Obviously, they got gashed on the one run, but I thought that was more misalignment. It was 100% misalignment than anything. They gave up 83 yards on one carry. The other 26 carries, they allowed 3.5 yards per average. So one bad play against the run, but everything else was really good on defense. Tackling, 13 missed tackles against the Jets. And it's been a criticism that I've had for the Bills defense, it feels like, for a number of years. And it continues to creep up. I don't expect there to be no missed tackles, but 13 in one game, it's too much. And unfortunately, that's a pretty common occurrence for this Bills defense over the last several years. On offense, good question here about leaning into the run game. I think it's fair to say that they didn't do it enough, especially because the Bills were in 12 personnel so often. I think like somewhere near 48 to 50 snaps of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field. And the Jets stayed in nickel. They stayed with 5 DBs on the field. They never brought in that third linebacker a single time when the Bills put 12 personnel on the field. And so you're getting small personnel. And that's the conflict we talk about with the Bills and this 12 personnel, is that no matter what the defense chooses to do, they're wrong. They're either going to be too small and not be able to defend the run effectively, or they're going to be too big and you're going to have athletic mismatches. And I feel like the Bills, especially in a game where Josh was unraveling a bit, not unraveling a bit, he absolutely was. He wasn't running the offense effectively. That the best thing they could have done was lean more into the run game, knowing that game where you're up by 10 at halftime and they got their backup quarterback in, I think they could have embraced that a little bit more by leaning even more into the run game. I mean, James Cook had 16 touches, but only 3 for Latavius Murray and Damian Harris, and that includes receptions. I think getting those guys going a little bit more in that game would have been effective, especially because they stayed in nickel. They stayed in nickel the entire game. So I think that's where I think they could have leaned into the run more. I think they should have, for sure. Next one here comes from Chris. Chris says, what about the Bills' performance on Monday night surprised you the most, but in a good way? I think the answer here is definitely Terrel Bernard. It's definitely him. I had low expectations for him, especially given he missed all of the preseason opportunities to run the defense. And he's a smaller linebacker that I thought instinctively in the past did not impress me. But I thought he played really well, all things considered, against the Jets. His coverage instincts really shined in the football game. He showed a quick trigger at times, able to fill. I thought he played good ball. And you all know the concern that I had for middle linebacker. And obviously this needs to play out. We need to see consistency. But for now, I'm not sitting here right now overly concerned that the Bills have this fatal flaw at linebacker. I'm excited to see how Terrel Bernard evolves, settles in, and how he produces. But that was definitely, to me, the thing that surprised me the most in a good way on Monday night against the Jets. All right, we got a bunch more to get to here But first, need to tell you about Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. And that's why Jace Medical offers the Jace case. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in emergency. Jace Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They have everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code locked on. Folks, you got to check out PrizePicks. PrizePicks is easily the funnest way to play daily fantasy sports. The format is awesome. It's just you versus the numbers. It's not you versus thousands of other players, including the pros, including the sharks. It's just you versus the projections. All you do is you select 2 or more players, you pick more or less on their projected stats, and you place your entry. Doesn't take long. Picks can be made in under a minute. And then when you win, the withdrawals are super, super quick and easy. I love watching football, and I love watching football even more when I have a PrizePicks entry because it just makes watching the game that much more exciting. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, the next one today comes from Eli. Eli says, is this the last dance with the core players on defense for the Bills? Do you visualize or predict an overhaul next offseason with our defense? Some of our players are entering that age where they are on the older side. Also, any big contracts looming in the defensive side for next season, or Josh Allen contract will provoke some tough decisions and overhaul on both sides of the team. I think it's fair to bring this up. I mean, there's some older players on defense, and there's some opportunities with their contracts that could lead to quite a bit of transition defensively next offseason. I'll point out the expiring contracts, and then I want to get into some of the contracts that are going to come into focus with some decisions that they can make. So expiring contracts, guys that are currently in the last year of their deal on the Bills defense. Micah Hyde, who's 32. Daquan Jones, who's 31. Leonard Floyd, who's 31. Tim Settle, who's 26. Jordan Phillips, who's 30. Dane Jackson, who's 26. AJ Epinesa, who's 24. Shaq Lawson, who's 29. And Taylor Rapp. All of those guys are expiring contracts. And so, obviously, decisions on whether or not to re-sign them or move on. And I think you'll see some guys that they'll re-sign and some guys that they'll move on from. Now, when it comes to other opportunities for cap savings, and whether it's restructures or cuts, there's other guys that pop for me. Trey White. The Bills can restructure Trey White and save $5 million in cap space, or they can cut him for $6.3 million in cap savings. Now, there's some dead cap accumulation with that. I think it's more likely that they restructure and save the $5 million. But if for some reason Trey White doesn't come back and look like Trey White, that's an opportunity that the Bills have. Now, I thought Trey White played really well against the Jets. Maybe his tackling was suspect, but I don't know. I've come to expect Trey White's tackling to be suspect. I think that's always been a black eye on who he is as a player. Taron Johnson, the Bills, I don't think will cut him, but they can restructure him for a $7.7 million savings. Von Miller, they can restructure him to save $10.9 million. And then Jordan Poyer is a cut candidate. They could cut him and save $5.5 million. So I think the question here provided a good opportunity to point at some of the stuff that is looming, and a lot of expiring contracts in addition to some contract opportunities to create space. And you could certainly see that happening on the defensive side of the football. I mean, it's been a nucleus, but it's been intact for a long time. And that's kind of the NFL. That's life in the NFL. Everyone has an expiration. And we'll find out. This season's got to play out. We'll learn a lot more about these players and what the decisions are that the Bills should make. But there's going to be some opportunities defensively to pay attention to next offseason. Jake says, I wanted to get your thoughts on Jordan Poyer. He had a terrible performance on run defense during the Pittsburgh preseason game, and it carried over into Monday night. Continuing into the backfield after the running back is already through the line, terrible angles and poor tackling, both run game and passes. It's the start of the season, so he doesn't have the injury reasoning like he did last year. Did Bean make a mistake and let his leadership / locker room presence overshadow the performance of an aging safety? Well, there's a lot to get into here. I mean, Jordan Poyer didn't play well against the Jets. I thought it was one of his worst performances as a Bill. I've said that openly. I was disappointed in him. How much do you put into it? We're going to let this season play out. At a minimum, I mean, it wound up being a pretty modest contract for him to come back. I know that, Jordan Poyer was kind of seeking that Harrison Smith contract. He didn't come close to getting that Harrison Smith contract. And maybe that says something, right? I mean, Jordan Poyer, for the season that he had last year, just didn't have a market, right? He came back to Buffalo after it seemed he was gone, and for a very modest 2-year contract. And I just went through it. They can cut him and save $5.5 million after the season. So obviously I'm curious to see how the season plays out. But he's not off to a good start. We'll see. I mean, safeties typically age fairly well. I didn't expect for Poyer to just hit a wall and not be able to produce. And so we'll see here. But the age plus the lack of market that he had, it brings up a fair question. Now, the good news is the Bills have youth at safety. If they need to move on, I mean, Damar Hamlin's there. They like Cam Lewis. Taylor Rapp is getting an opportunity this year, although I don't think his first game went particularly well. So I think the Bills have options. It's a replaceable situation in terms of safeties, but I thought Jordan Poyer didn't look good. He did not look good against the Jets. I thought Micah Hyde did. And I think it's interesting that some people have kind of unfairly lumped in Micah Hyde. I thought his tackling and angles and coverage was really good. I don't feel like the same was for Jordan Poyer. Let's see how it plays out. Next one here comes from Nick. Nick says, where do you stand on Sean McDermott kicking the early field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 2? I feel against a backup quarterback, you shouldn't be afraid of a shorter field goal, and that should up your desire to go for that. And with Allen's running ability, 4th and 2 should even be more probable to get. At the time of when Sean decided to kick that field goal, I felt like if Aaron Rodgers was still in the game, that you might want to go for it and get the points. For the Zach Wilson dynamic, I think he made the right choice because you get points on the board and you position yourself to get a multi-score lead. And I think anytime you can get a multi-score lead against a quarterback like Zach Wilson and put them in a position where, they have to throw the football, I think that's probably the right play there. In all reality, I thought Sean managed the game fine. His starting quarterback just didn't execute at a level necessary to embrace that game script. The other thing that came up with a lot of people was on the play where there was 2 penalties against the Jets that would have pushed that field goal back to like 53 yards, assuming the Bills didn't give up any yards on the play. Should he have taken the opportunity to move the Jets back or just, decline the penalties? It's 4th down, kick the 42 yards or whatever the field goal was that they wound up making. I think in hindsight, it's easy to say, yeah, they should have moved them back. And maybe there's a possibility that, they get even further back with a negative play or, it's a longer field goal. That means it's a tougher field goal. But at the time I felt like, it's already 4th and long. How easy it is to get an illegal contact call or something that goes wrong and they get an automatic 1st down. I thought it was good to force the field goal and get the ball back. And in hindsight, maybe I was wrong in that. And I think whenever you lose the game, all of these decisions come into question and you feel like everything was wrong. But I think at the end of the day, this is why it just continues to go back to Josh Allen. If Josh Allen plays the game the way he's supposed to play the game, you're not in these positions. And so I think that was the piece of the equation that I guess Sean McDermott miscalculated, was that Josh Allen was going to turn into an immature quarterback and not play the game the right way, because it was a defensive struggle. You're up by 10 at halftime. You have a lead in the 4th quarter. You have a touchdown lead in the 4th quarter, like against Zach Wilson. Shouldn't have came to any of this stuff at all. And again, when you lose the game, everything looks like it's the wrong decision. At the time, I kind of understood both choices. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Crossover Thursday coming tomorrow. Your boy Q and I from Locked On Raiders. We're going to get ready for the game, talk about the top storylines, matchups. We'll give you some predictions. And then, of course, my comprehensive primer. I'm going to plot the path for a Bills win against the Raiders coming your way. Probably going to drop that late Thursday for the Friday podcast. And then, of course, one more episode before the Bills play the Raiders where I'll give you my final thoughts, injuries with banged up Bills. And then, of course, my predictions, my 5 predictions for the game. So plenty of content still coming your way before the Bills face the Raiders. Make sure that you don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.